All right, welcome to another episode of The Aspiring VC. Your host, Matt Snow with Mass Ventures here. I have Aashna Kumar at Generation Ventures. But before we go into anything too serious, my starter question is always Dunkin' or Starbucks. What would your pick be?
So I'm Canadian, so we don't have Dunkin', so I'm gonna have to go with Starbucks.
Fair. Cool. Well, let's do like just a little 2-minute summary. Talk about yourself, the firm, and the role that you're in.
Yeah, for sure. So I am from Toronto. I am an associate at Generation Ventures. We are the venture arm of a broader family office called Generation Capital, which invests across asset classes. So, real estate, private equity, growth equity. We have a winery that's pretty fun. But I lead due diligence for our venture team, which includes venture funds as well as direct investments. So on the fund side, we back everything from up and coming incubators to household name venture and growth equity funds. Usually our commitment is kind of 5 to 10 million up. And then on the fund side, we primarily look at B2B SaaS, but because we're a family office, we have a very flexible mandate. So we do have some consumer, some hardware, some marketplace. We've got everything from seed through to Series C, but our sweet spot is definitely Series A. A typical check size for us is about 2 to 4 million US, and we're very active investors. So we're on the boards of almost all of our companies. I'm on 2 of the boards myself.
That's awesome. And when you think back to like the pivotal life experiences that helped you kind of break into the scene, obviously it's a very hard industry to break into. What are some of the things that worked for you and kind of got you to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So, looking back at my career path, I knew I wanted to do venture since I was in high school and I learned about what venture is. But there isn't really a straight line to getting there. And when I started in my undergrad program, which was Queen's Commerce, there wasn't as much of a venture scene in Toronto as there is today. So the guidance that I received was always to, start and sell a business or do like 10 years of investment banking before going into venture capital. So I went down the venture route, the banking route, hoping to get into venture. I did 2 internships at CIBC, which is one of the big banks in Canada. My first was in sales and trading. My second one was in investment banking. And I ended up signing full time with RBC Capital Markets, which is the largest investment bank in Canada, for full time. And, at this point, I wasn't really thinking about getting into venture anymore. I, wanted to build out my career in capital markets. I was really lucky to be in the natural resources group. In Canada, natural resources is always, the biggest team for investment banks. So I was focused on metals and mining. And while I thought it was great, it didn't really have everything that I was looking for in terms of the opportunities to learn new things every day. So when I started engaging in mining, I was taking classes about geology to really understand the way that these businesses operated. But it started to feel like once you understood the way that one worked, a lot of them were very similar. And I started thinking again about how I wanted to be a venture capitalist when I was younger, and how it'd be really great to be in a role where you could learn about new industries and meet new people every day. It was, I guess, a little more than a year into my time at RBC when a venture fund actually reached out to me about an opportunity to join as an analyst. And I was really surprised because I thought that going into venture was out of scope for me because I had this natural resources background. And this is where, I met with that fund and they said very clearly to me that it didn't matter what my background was. I'm young enough that all that matters is, a willingness to work hard and a desire to learn. So I was motivated then to apply to venture funds and learn more. And ultimately, I saw a posting for Generation Ventures on Indeed.com, and I applied through that. And I ended up getting that job and a few others. but I ultimately chose Generation based on, meeting the team and seeing how much variety we had in terms of our investment scope and the opportunity for me to grow within that role.
And it's funny, so the firm that hit you up is not Generation, right? It's this other firm that gave you this confidence that like, "Oh, I can do this," right?
Yeah, and I'm still definitely friends with the person who reached out to me from that firm, and I think that they're great. It just ultimately, I really wanted to have a really generalist scope in terms of my first investment role, and so I'm really happy that I went with Gen.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you think about, listeners that are kind of in the shoes that you were in, like wanting to break in, whether they're a couple years into the career or still in college, what are kind of practical pieces of advice you have on finding the passion, networking, selecting the right, internships, and even maybe some full-time experiences first?
Yeah, for sure. So I know that it really differs based on region. So I'm the only person out of my kind of broad cohort of junior VCs in Toronto that I know that came from an investment banking background. Most folks came from consulting or operating backgrounds or formally started businesses before going into venture. And then I know that if I go south of the border, there's a lot of ex-bankers in VC in the States. So what I would want to say to folks is that there's no, perfect profile for what makes a great venture capitalist. I thought myself, being in mining, that it wasn't even a path for me anymore, and now I'm 3 years into it, and an associate now. So what I would say to people is, find something that really lights your passion, do a great job at it, and see if you like to do that, and if so, keep on doing it. And if not, I'm sure that you bring in some sort of unique expertise that a venture fund could find valuable. It depends on where you are, but there are many highly specialized venture funds. So, it doesn't really matter what industry you work in. I'm sure that there's a fund that could benefit from your unique skill set. So I guess what I would say is, do something that interests you. And there's thousands of funds, so I'm sure that you'll get hired by one based on doing that.
Definitely. And I think you alluded to this earlier with, enjoying meeting new people every day and learning new topics. But, what are some of the other things that pulled you into venture and that kind of keep you excited about the space?
Yeah, for sure. And like for me, one of the biggest things is having the opportunity to learn something new every day. And that is because, first of all, tech touches every industry. Even if you're in, a specialized fund like a prop tech fund, well, prop tech could mean so many things and touch so many sectors. If you're even in fintech, finance is everywhere. I happen to be in a very generalist fund, so I get to see everything from, up and coming snack foods to deep tech and cybersecurity to streetwear and experience economy. And I have the privilege of learning from founders who have really dedicated their lives to becoming leaders and thought leaders in their fields. So it's just been such a humbling experience for me to be able to learn from these people, to be able to partner and work with them and to be able to provide value in the ways that I can.
Definitely. And when you think about being kind of like this polymath generalist that can, be able to be quickly learning in all these fields, how do you balance like that mindset with the ability to like go deep enough when you have to be doing diligence or kind of, think about like thematic sectors that you want to go after?
For sure. So, GenVen operates in an asset allocation model. We think about, what sectors are we overweight and underweight on. So, for example, I just spent 3 months doing a white paper on agriculture and ag tech because it's a space that, we didn't have very much exposure to real assets in the portfolio. So, spent a good amount of time digging into that space, understanding where it makes sense for us, interviewing folks who invest in the space already, folks on the fields, founders who are just personal friends of mine who could dish everything that was worth knowing. And ultimately, you walk into these deep dives with key questions that you want to get answered. And you go as deep as you can to really be able to formulate opinions and answers about those questions. So, the depth and the scope really ranges based on the subsector that you're thinking about. But I think it's something that's really team driven when we're thinking about how deep we want to go and what makes the most sense for us.
Definitely. And another thing I'm curious about is being in both funds and companies, you guys have this massive data set, right? And exposure to
Mhm.
so many companies. And how
Yeah.
do you guys think about, taking in all that data and kind of leveraging the insights on kind of all the layers of the stack, all the way up the fund level, all the way down to, pre-seed and seed and A and at the founder level?
Yeah, for sure. So, we are very close and very engaged with all of our fund investments. I know I personally do monthly calls with several of our fund investments. So we are very aware of the stories in each and every portfolio company, in terms of, how they're doing, where the founder is at, what are their key challenges, what are their key opportunities, the way that we should be thinking about the markets that they operate in. And the way that, I handle these fund relationships is I know every company to a point where I want to preempt our partners there and ask them about specific companies if it seems like it's time for them to start raising, for example. So it's really valuable for us to not only have our fingers on the pulse, but also be able to connect the dots. So, for example, one of our fund investments, they're looking at an opportunity in the food space. And we're also invested in a fund that is solely dedicated to food and food tech. So, rather than me just having monthly catch ups separately with both of them, I said, why don't we do like a group catch up and chat together as part of the ecosystem, engaging in knowledge sharing. So, really being able to leverage that and add value. We found that a lot of our investments on the private equity side have served as great customers for not only our venture investments, but also the venture investments in our fund portfolio. So being able to offer those commercial introductions has also been, invaluable to our funds and has been great for us in terms of market mapping, understanding where the world is at, and piecing together all of the different relationships that we are really grateful to own.
Yeah, and it sounds like a true like platform where like each element is like building on top and like making the whole thing stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I think we can jump into some of these rapid fire ones if you're ready.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
First one is like, who's been one of your most important mentors? And the caveat is just, if you remember like specific action they took or like a piece of advice that like still stays in your mind today.
Um, yeah, no, I would say it's really hard for me to just pick one mentor. I have so many guides in my life and so many folks who have really come through to me and for me at specific, periods in my life. But I would say, my mom and my sister have continued to be guiding lights and supports for me and also my biggest champions through everything. So I think they've been fantastic. My bosses here at Generation, so Luke McCormick and Alistair Mitchell have been such incredible champions for me my entire tenure working here. I had amazing mentors who pushed me to be the best version of myself at RBC, like Jackie Nixon and Lindsay Patrick. And looking back at Queens, I was really grateful to have really talented people championing me and they're not people who I leverage so much anymore, but just catch up with. And it's just so nice to share where I'm at with in my life and cheer them on and what they're doing as well. So folks like Dan McGee and Cyrus Saimoom have been, invaluable to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you think about like, VCs that you're a huge fan of, outside of your own fund, whether it's a person or just a specific firm, like who's one that you think of right away?
Um, I mean, for me, I always admire VCs who I know personally. And so when I have to think of a VC who I really admire and someone who I definitely should have added to the mentor list, I would have to say, Laura Lenz, who was the partner at GenVen, one of the partners at GenVen when I started. And now she is leading Canada for OMERS Ventures. And she is so smart and so thoughtful and in terms of the way that she approaches diligence. And I'm so grateful that she really taught me everything from day one, coming into venture with no experience in technology or investing. So I'd say, she's someone who I continue to look up to, and I'm grateful to know that I can text or email her anytime.
That's awesome. And curious, like, maybe from your background in the, energy space before, but what's like a subsector right now that's top of mind that, you're really excited about?
Yeah, so I mentioned that that white paper on agriculture. I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity in the ag tech space. Adoption of agriculture technology has skyrocketed in the past 3 years alone. So it's really not that undigitized landscape that some folks have painted it out to be. Farmers are very open to adopting things that will help them improve their efficiencies and optimize their yields. And so I think there's a huge amount of opportunity in the agriculture space, and it's a great time to help really shape the foundation of what will be a digital farm in the future. I'm particularly excited about opportunities in the post-harvest space too. So, minimizing food waste in the value chain. So once the goods are extracted from the crops, and what does storage look like on the farm? How do we extend the life of all of these goods that are highly perishable? And there's a lot of really exciting technology that's enabling that.
That's awesome. It sounds like you've definitely gone in the weeds on this one. So I guess that's a good example of having
For
the
sure.
generalist mindset, but going in at sometimes going real deep.
Yeah.
Um, this is a fun one. Took this question from Tim Ferriss, but really enjoy it. What's like a purchase of like $100 or a couple $100 that has just had like outsized amount of happiness for you?
Okay. I would have to say, this is not work related, but for Christmas, my parents got me just like an old used Wii, because the one I had growing up it's just old and busted now. But I still have all my Wii games. Um, so it was really nice to dust off my old games this year and play with my family, and really unplug. And I think there's such a huge difference between unplugging by going on social media or watching television versus playing a game on a console where there's no notifications to distract you from what you're doing. It's just pure entertainment. And so it's been a lot of fun just playing things like old school Mario Kart, and pulling out Super Mario Galaxy again, which in my opinion is the greatest game of all time.
That's awesome. Are you a Wii golf fan too?
I am, but I'd have to say that I'm a huge fan of the baseball on Wii Sports.
Hmm. It's been you're making me want to crack out a Wii. It's been a long time.
I know it's always a good time.
That's awesome. Oh, a new one that a recent guest encouraged me to do. Opportunity for you to throw a question my way.
For sure. I would be curious to know, I'm sure you've had a lot of interviews. What is the most quotable thing that you've taken away from all your interviews so far?
So last one I did was Tim McLaughlin, and he threw a question at me, and it was, you're evaluating 10 founders. Um,
Hmm.
they're going to pitch to you, and then you can only ask them a single question, and the answer to
Hmm.
that one question will decide who of the 10 gets the money. And my answer to it was that I was going to ask them, like, why are you doing this? And if the answer was only financial, they're out. It has to be that they have a life passion. And the
Hmm.
assumption is that this is going to be so hard that if they're only in it for the money, they're not going to make it through.
Yeah.
So I need to know that, whatever they're doing really makes sense for their life story and passion, and that it like kind of aligns their purpose. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
so that was
Um,
my gut instinct on what to say, but
No, I think that's great. I mean, in my free time, I run a not-for-profit accelerator program for MVP stage founders. So these guys are pre-revenue. They haven't brought in any money yet. They're just all heart. And being able to engage with them, and being able to hear their stories and what inspired them to take the leap, it's just it's so touching. And so I think that's a great question.
yeah, no, definitely one of those deep questions that really hits hard when you're not expecting it.
For sure.
Um, so, lastly, just please promote yourself. Where can people find you online, social media, and all that jazz?
Yeah, for sure. So on Twitter, you can find me at my first name, so Aashna. My middle initial is S, and then my last name is Kumar. And you can also find me on Clubhouse at just my first name, Aashna. And you can add me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate the time today. This was an awesome interview, and hopefully we'll be in touch again soon.
Okay, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Looking to innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.